Peace be with you. Now, in this collective worship today, we're going to think about the effect that the words that we speak can have on other people. But to begin with, I'd like you to imagine a building site. If you've ever been to a building site or seen one, you'll know there can be lots of different machines that work on a building site and lots of different things that might be going on. So, for example, there might be a digger that digs down into the ground and excavates the earth. But two particular machines that I want to think about with you for a moment now. First of all, a bulldozer. A bulldozer on a building site pulls things down, breaks things down, and maybe pushes things out of the way. That's the first thing, a bulldozer. And the second one is a crane. A crane is quite different. A crane lifts things up. A crane helps to build things. So we could say that a bulldozer is doing destructive things, breaking things down, and a crane is constructive, helping to build things up. And thinking about what these two different machines do can also help us think about what our words do and the effects that the words that we say can have on other people, depending on whether we're like the bulldozer. If we say unkind or critical words or hurtful words to someone else, and that can bring them down or make them feel pushed out or left out. That's destructive, a bit like the bulldozer. Or actually, our words can be more like the crane. If we say words that are kind, that are encouraging to someone else, then it can build them up, help to make them feel better, help them to feel included. And that's constructive, and perhaps a bit like the crane on the building site. So just one quick example. Maybe if someone in your class is struggling with their work, say you're doing maths and someone is really struggling to get the work done, maybe because they don't quite understand what they're doing or it's just taking a long time to finish the task. Then, well, on the one hand, you might say something insensitive and critical, which makes them feel bad about it and puts them down. But actually, a much better choice would be to say something positive and encouraging to them, to build them up, to spur them on, so that they keep going and stick with it to try to get the task done. So, in other words, much better to be like the crane and to use words that encourage and build people up, rather than being like the bulldozer, using words that may leave people feeling discouraged, put down, pushed out, or feeling bad. Now, thinking about building sites, there is a story in the Bible, in the Old Testament, that is all about rebuilding things that have been broken down. It's the story of a man called Nehemiah, and it's a really inspiring story. In it, God calls Nehemiah to return to his home city of Jerusalem, which is in ruins, and God calls him to gather the people together and to rebuild the city, and in particular to rebuild its broken walls. Now, Nehemiah is the leader of the people, and he gathers all the people together and he encourages them in the work that they've got to do, that together they can rebuild the city walls. It's a big task. It will take lots of time, lots of hard work, and it won't be easy. But Nehemiah believes that with God's help, they can do it. But the problem is that there are others who don't like this at all. There are other people living in the surrounding area who don't want to see Jerusalem rebuilt. They don't want the walls to be built up strong again. So they do what the bulldozer does. They use destructive words. They insult God's people. They put them down. They tell them that they can't possibly complete this difficult task. They even threaten to attack the city while the people are working to rebuild it. And the people start to doubt whether they can really do this huge task of rebuilding the walls. The people get tired and they don't know if they can carry on. But Nehemiah, their leader, does something a bit more like what the crane does. He speaks words of encouragement to the people, constructive words that encourage them and build them up. He says, don't be afraid. Remember that God is with you and that he will help you. And he encourages God's people to continue to work together, to spur each other on, support and encourage each other to keep going and not to give up. And Nehemiah also prays and asks God to help them in their difficult task. And working together and with God's help, encouraging each other, they manage to finish the job and they rebuild the city walls of Jerusalem. Now, the words that we say can be powerful. They can have a real effect on other people, either to build them up or to tear them down. We heard both of those things happening in the story of Nehemiah and the rebuilding of the city walls. So I wonder, can you think of a time when someone has been perhaps a bit like a bulldozer to you and said something unkind or critical or insulting or even rude to you? And how did you feel about it? But also I wonder, can you think of a time when someone was more like the crane and they said something that built you up and encouraged you? Something that was kind, helpful, or loving? And how did you feel then? In the New Testament, the Apostle Paul says in one of his letters, "Encourage one another and build each other up." That's in 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 11. And that's the best thing that we can do, the best way to use the words that we speak to encourage others. So this week, in your classrooms or out in the playground, or indeed at home with your families, what could you do to encourage and build someone else up? I encourage you to have a think about that and see how you could put this into practice this week. And we're going to finish now with a prayer. If you agree with what I say, then please do join in with saying Amen at the end. So, dear Lord, thank you for the way that you used Nehemiah to encourage the people when they had a really difficult task to do. And thank you that we can also be encouragers, using our words to be kind and to build each other up. Please help us today to do that. Amen.